Alright, let's do some examples with reference angles now. So in the previous video we defined what a reference angle is and we talked about how to find it. And remember, we made that chart, but we don't want to memorize the chart, we just want to know and understand how the chart is filled in so that we can always do it like that. So that way it'll be easier to keep things straight and not mix them up, because it might be kind of easy to mix some stuff up here. So anyway, find the reference angle for 7 pi over 6. Okay, so the first thing we notice is, okay, it's in radians. So then the first thing we want to do is ask ourselves, is this between 0 and 2 pi radians? And yeah, it is, right? 7 pi over 6, it's less than 2 pi radians because 2 pi radians is the same thing as if you multiply by 6 over 6. That's 12 pi over 6, right? So 7 pi over 6 is less than 12 pi over 6, and of course 7 pi over 6 is positive, it's larger than 0. So it is between 0 and 2 pi, okay? So then, okay, that's the first thing we ask ourselves. And then the answer is yes, it's between 0 and 2 pi, so let's draw it. Okay, now this is an angle on the unit circle, so we ought to know where it is, but we don't have to find reference angles in general, we don't have to know exactly where the angle is, we just have to know what quadrant it's in. Okay, so what quadrant is this guy in? It's in the third quadrant, right? Because 7 pi over 6 is slightly larger than 6 pi over 6, and 6 pi over 6 equals pi, okay? And pi radians, let's draw that, so pi radians would put us about here, or exactly here. Okay, pi radians puts us across to right here. That's the same thing as 6 pi over 6. 7 pi over 6 is a tiny bit larger than that. Okay, so that's going to put us right about here. Okay. So not really to scale the way I drew it. But also we can consult the unit circle and see that 7 pi over 6 is indeed right here in the third quadrant. Okay, there's 7 pi over 6 in the third quadrant. So we can just draw that there. Anyway, this is 7 pi over 6 sitting here in the third quadrant. So remember, how do we get a reference angle in the third quadrant? Well, what is the reference angle? So let's zoom in on this picture here. The reference angle is this guy here. Okay, it's the acute angle between the terminal side of the angle, okay, the terminal side of our given angle theta, and the x-axis. So the acute angle between those two is going to be this angle right here. How do we get that? Well, what we do is we take this entire angle, subtract off the stuff we don't want, and then we have left over the stuff we do want, okay? So take the entire angle, which is 7 pi over 6. So let's write that down. Take the entire angle, 7 pi over 6. Subtract off the stuff we don't want. Okay, the stuff we don't want is what goes all the way around to the other side of the x-axis. So here's the entire angle, okay? Here's the stuff we don't want. Okay, stop right here. So the stuff we don't want is just pi, because if we subtract off the pi, then we're going to be left with just this stuff, okay? So take the entire angle, subtract off what we don't want, and then we'll be left with what we do want. So 7 pi over 6 minus pi, so multiply this by 6 over 6. That's 7 pi over 6 minus 6 pi over 6, so common denominator, okay, it's what we're doing there. And then we end up with pi over 6. And that's our answer. So find the reference angle for 7 pi over 6, the answer is pi over 6, okay? So that's example 1. Let's do 3 more simple examples in this video. So here's an example with an angle between 0 and 2 pi in the third quadrant. So let's do between 0 and 2 pi and in the other 3 quadrants. So we'll do 3 more examples. Okay, so again, since we're in the third quadrant, we do the angle minus pi. Okay, so remember that's what we did. We talked about that in the previous video. So let's do example 2. But again, we don't want to just straight up memorize that. We want to know how to do this. So what we want to do is first ask ourselves, is the given angle between 0 and 2 pi? And if it is, then draw the picture and then just use the picture, go from there. So find the reference angle for, now let's do 3 pi over 4. Okay, find the reference angle for 3 pi over 4. So let's zoom back out a bit. So again, first thing we ask ourselves, is this between 0 and 2 pi? Yeah, it is, because 2 pi, if we multiply by 4 over 4 for a common denominator, that's 8 pi over 4. 3 pi over 4 is obviously positive, right? It's larger than 0, and it's totally less than 8 pi over 4. Okay, 3 pi is less than 8 pi, so 3 pi over 4 is less than 8 pi over 4. So this is between 0 and 2 pi. Okay, so since it is, then we just go ahead and draw it. So first let's draw it. Now notice this is another special angle on the unit circle, right? So we ought to know where it is, but if we're not sure, we can consult the unit circle here. So pi over 4, 3 pi over 4. Okay, so here's 3 pi over 4 right here in the second quadrant. So you might be wondering, well, what do we do if it's not a special angle that's not labeled on the unit circle? How do we approach that? We'll do that in more complicated examples in a separate video. So anyway, let's go ahead and draw this. 3 pi over 4 puts us up here. So here's 3 pi over 4. Okay, there's our angle 3 pi over 4 right there. Now zoom in on that. So we want the reference angle for that. So remember, the reference angle is the acute angle between the terminal side of the given angle and the x-axis. So here's the terminal side. The acute angle between that and the x-axis is going to be this guy right here. So remember, go in the clockwise direction, or sorry, the counterclockwise. Go in the counterclockwise direction for a positive angle, because acute angles are positive, right? So it's got to be this angle here. So what we do is, since we're in the second quadrant, what do? Well, we want this right here. So what we could do is go all the way around pi. Okay, we can go pi radians around, subtract off this stuff that we don't want. Okay, go pi radians around, subtract off this stuff, so that we'll just be left with this. Okay, go pi around, subtract off this given angle, so then we'll just be left with this. Okay, so the reference angle then is going to be pi minus 3 pi over 4. So common denominator, multiply this by 4 over 4. Okay, so that's going to be 4 pi over 4 minus 3 pi over 4. And that's just pi over 4, right? Okay, so that's our reference angle there. Okay, so the reference angle for 3 pi over 4 is just pi over 4. Okay. So again, I think we briefly mentioned in the previous video, but why are these reference angles useful? Well, they help you evaluate trig functions. It's just going to be another technique for us to use to evaluate trig functions, and they really do make things pretty simple. So anyway, find the reference angle for 3 pi over 4. It's pi over 4 because 3 pi over 4 goes in the second quadrant, and if we're in the second quadrant, we do pi minus the given angle. Okay, if we're between 0 and 2 pi. Okay, so that's example 2 with finding reference angles. So for example 3. For example 3, we're going to want to find another reference angle, of course, that's what we're doing here. So for example 3, let's find the reference angle for 5 pi over 3. Pi over 3. Okay. Okay, so again, just like before, ask ourselves, is this between 0 and 2 pi? Okay, first of all, it's clearly positive, so it's larger than 0. And then is it less than 2 pi? Well, 2 pi multiplied by 3 over 3 for a common denominator. That's 6 pi over 3. Okay, so 5 pi over 3 is less than 6 pi over 3. Okay, so we're good. It's between 0 and 2 pi. But again, also, hopefully we know, okay, 5 pi over 3, that is a special angle on the unit circle, so we really ought to know that. It's definitely a good idea to have those angles memorized. Know what they are, where they are, how to put them there, things like that. And we talked about the unit circle, filling that in a separate video. So anyway, find the reference angle for 5 pi over 3. Let's go ahead and draw this now that we know it's between 0 and 2 pi. Okay, 5 pi over 3, that's going to put us in the fourth quadrant, right? So pi over 3, 2 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3, 5 pi over 3. So if we don't remember where that is, we can consult the unit circle and see, okay, that's in the fourth quadrant there. So 5 pi over 3, kind of sort of about down here. So that's 5 pi over 3. Ugh. Okay, zoom in a bit on that. Okay, so that's a picture there. Now, remember, the reference angle is the acute angle between the x-axis and the terminal side of the given angle. So that's going to be this guy right here. Okay, that's the only possibility, is this guy right here. So what is this angle? Well, if we go all the way around full circle, that's 2 pi radians. Subtract off what we don't want, which is this guy, and then we'll be left with what we do want. Okay, so if we go full circle, subtract off all this stuff up to here, then we'll be left over with this. Okay, what we'll have left is this. So go full circle, which means go 2 pi, subtract off all this stuff right here. Okay, subtract off all this stuff right here, which means subtract 5 pi over 3, then we'll be left with what we want. Okay, so first get a common denominator here, so multiply by 3 over 3. Let's do it like this. So 3 over 3 times 2 pi, that's 6 pi over 3. We also talked about that up here earlier. Minus 5 pi over 3 still. Okay, so 6 pi over 3 minus 5 pi over 3 is just pi over 3. Okay, so that's example 3 with finding a reference angle. So you might be noticing a pattern here. What was the answer to example 1? It was pi over 6. What was the answer to example 2? Pi over 4. The answer to this one was pi over 3. So you might be thinking, well, hey, isn't the reference angle just always pi over whatever the denominator is? So 5 pi over 3, the reference angle is pi over 3. 7 pi over 6, the reference angle is pi over 6. 3 pi over 4, the reference angle is pi over 4. Won't that always be the case? And no, not always. It will always be the case for things over for something pi over 3, something pi over 4, something pi over 6. So for all these angles on the unit circle here, and all of their coterminal angles, yeah, 7 pi over 6, the reference angle is pi over 6. 5 pi over 4, the reference angle is pi over 4. 4 pi over 3, the reference angle is pi over 3, and so on and so forth. For these special angles, yeah, that's always the case, but you might have other different types of angles, like you could have 5 pi over 8, okay? So if you have 5 pi over 8, that might have a different reference angle. Okay, so that's not necessarily just going to be pi over 8. Okay, so you got to be careful about that. And actually, for 5 pi over 8, the reference angle is 3 pi over 8, but we'll do examples like that later. Okay, but I just want to point out, don't get in the habit of thinking this. Okay, this only is true for the special angles on the unit circle. So stuff pi over 3, stuff times pi over 4, stuff times pi over 6. Yeah, the reference angles will be nice like that. They'll always be pi over 3, pi over 4, pi over 6. But be very careful because that's only true for those angles, okay? So if you have stuff over 5, stuff over 8, stuff over 12, it could be different. So be careful about that. Okay, so that's one example in quadrant 3, one in quadrant 2, one in quadrant 4. Let's do one in quadrant 1 real quick, even though it's not really anything. Because remember, if you're between 0 and 2 pi in quadrant 1, then the reference angle is just itself. But just to be thorough, we'll just show that real quick. Okay, so find the reference angle for, let's say, pi over 6. Okay, so first, is it between 0 and 2 pi? Yeah, it's clearly less than 2 pi. It's clearly positive. Okay, so remember 2 pi is 12 pi over 6. 1 pi over 6 is obviously less than that. So clearly that's between 0 and 2 pi, so we just draw it. Pi over 6, we definitely want to know where that is. That's in the first quadrant. It is one of our special angles on the unit circle. Okay, pi over 6. So if we draw that, that's going to be here. Pi over 6. So remember, the reference angle is the acute angle between the terminal side of theta, okay, where this is our theta here, our given angle theta. So the reference angle is the acute angle between the given angle and the x-axis. Well, that's already this angle, okay, so the reference angle is just itself. Okay, so remember we talked about in the previous video, if theta is between 0 and 2 pi, and if theta is in the first quadrant, then it's its own reference angle. So the reference angle is pi over 6. Okay. Pi over 6. Well, notice again, another reference angle, just pi over 6, right? So, just like we talked about a minute ago. So for the special angles, stuff times pi over 6, stuff times pi over 3, stuff times pi over 4, and all of their coterminal angles, it's always going to be just pi over 6, pi over 3, pi over 4 for the reference angle. But again, for more complicated or different types of angles, it could be different, so be very careful about that. Okay, okay, so that's 4 simple examples with finding reference angles. We'll start doing more complicated examples in the next video.